Yo, what is going on, guys? Godrekton here today, bringing you a new video, but not just any video. This is my Season 14 Renekton build guide and itemization video. Now, I know what a lot of you guys are thinking. Where has this video been? I've been constantly seeming like I've been gaslighting my community and also the Renekton mains community about making an itemization and build guide video for so long. So, where has it been? The reason I haven't came out of it right away is because I wanted to make sure that I was fully ready to make this video with the information that I would be able to provide, being that I wanted to test every item, every build. I wanted to see how the meta was. I wanted Renekton to be a little bit better as well, just so, like, you know, I had a better varying results too, because I felt like I hit quite a wall this season so far, and that was mainly because Renekton was weak, but also the fact that the meta has been very abhorrent too towards top laners and bruisers, in my opinion. So with that, I kind of waited a little bit on this video, and I wanted to also make sure that I gathered enough data for myself on all the items that I played, knowing how they all work, watching other Renekton players play. I just wanted to see like what was going to happen really before I made this video. And as you guys know as well, I did make a video before this eventual build guide video about the items like in the preseason. So I made that video and I also explained that I would try to make a build guide as soon as I was ready to make that video. And now that I reached Masters again, after a little bit of a, you know, tumultuous journey, I finally decided, you know, I'll try and make some videos again because I feel a bit more confident in my play. And just the game itself that, you know, why not make a build guide video? Because I know you guys are constantly asking for it. I know I keep promising videos and not delivering. So before I do that again, I want to make sure that if I say that, I'm going to do it. So yeah. And on top of that too, I have a lot of videos that are already prepared, but I feel like I need to do things step by step, and that's why in my first video back after a few weeks of a little break, that I will be starting on this build guide video. Before I get into the actual items and everything too, I do just want to say real quickly that this build guide is not going to talk about runes, because in my opinion, I don't think runes really matter, to be honest. As long as you're running double adaptive force or even attack speed shard, and then you're alternating between maybe tenacity and base health, I think that is practically it from minor runes. I mean, your typical other runes are practically the same. It's just that unflinching is a little bit different. And, you know, that's basically it. And since that last video too, I know PTA and Conqueror did get touched a little bit, but that doesn't mean my opinions change because I feel like the way the runes work are exactly the same. So if you want my insight onto every rune that I believe is still up to date and maybe still worth considering to look at, then make sure to click on the screen here and it'll take you to my video and even link you to various topics and timestamps in the video to explain my thoughts and opinions on very certain things. With all that being said though, guys, I hope you enjoy this video. I hope you learned something. I will have timestamps through this video too for the varying topics that I will be going through. Just to quickly, you know, go into that, I have my starting items here. I have the bugged items follow-up, which I did make a video on, but I didn't really make a video afterwards to see if they're working or not. So if you're a little bit skeptical, I will talk about them if they're fixed or not. Next, I will talk about items that I like a lot personally, which are the main items that you're going to consistently see within this video that are referenced and build around. Next, we have some items that are a little bit lesser considered for me. Items that I see some people play, but I just don't think they're good enough personally. And then following from that, I'm going to go over every one of these builds and explain when they're good, what they're good for, what they're not good for. I'll explain absolutely everything that I can. But with that being said, let us get into the video. So guys, to start off in this video, I want to talk about the starting items for Renekton. Now, not much has really changed in the grand scheme of things, apart of like the inclusion of new items and returning items, such as Brutalizer and Tiamat, and they've also changed certain other little things since my last one, like Doran's Blade having all these stats, and Longsword overall just being a bit more nerfed. Now, to quickly explain the main start you want to do, Doran's Blade is quite possibly the best start you want to play on Renekton because the stat value, you're getting so much gold and stats here with the 10 AD, 100 health, and 3.5 lifesteal. It's a great star item with Red Pot. Typically with Conqueror, or even just PTA, you know, like you have lots of AD to kind of reinforce your trades. You're very tanky in subsequent with the lifesteal and Conqueror healing as well, which can give you a lot of edge in like most of the fights, which can give you a positive edge within the fights that allow you to complete stat check your opponents and make you pretty hard for them to kill you. Now, I'm a big fan of Doran's Blade, but that isn't to say that I would not go longsword sometimes. Now, I'm not the biggest advocate because I think it is too risky to play these days. And in my opinion, I have a rule on Renekton where if I die 2 times back to back in the laning phase, my lane is practically over, right? And in the climate of matchups where there's a lot of ranged champions, a lot of poke matchups, even a lot of high bursty champions within the game, it is incredibly hard to make longsword work with the rune changes and stuff like that. And being that Doran's Blade is just completely superior, which guarantees you to win majority of lanes. I don't see the need to coin flip on a longsword, although you can save a lot of gold in the process if you do get a good matchup. So I'd only recommend it in probably like some pretty good matchups overall. And I might have a tier list here on the screen. I'm not sure if I'll fully go through with it, but I might have something here now just to show you a little representation of the items I'm going to be going into certain matchups, as well as also D-Shield, which I'm about to talk about now. So D-Shield here. D-Shield is very good into poke matchups, and being that in the climate of the game right now, that is basically all the game's about. You're seeing Karmas, Veins, Quins, Actions, you name it, right? There's so many poke champs right now, and it's pretty infuriating. And the best thing that you can do is try to mana burn them, try to out-sustain them with your Q healing buff that you also received. Very minimal, but still adds to the overall sustaining aspect of the nature of the game you want to play. So with that said, going D-Shield plus Second Wind is very superior. Typically, you can get to your level 6 power spikes a lot easier. You can avoid bleeding deaths to people. It is honestly super good. So, you know, between my starts, I like going D-Blade and D-Shield mainly. And again, I'm going to show this little thing on the screen now, when to go each of these items, in my opinion. And yeah, maybe you guys want to try Longsword as well. Longsword, again, only in the easiest of matchups, I'd recommend that. But again, I think in this climate of the game, it's way too risky. But unless you're 3-in-1 warrior, who's a complete beast, by the way, it's probably like the time you probably want to really do it. Now we talked about star items, I do want to go into the components. Components play a really big role this season, and unfortunately, after this video is made, I believe some of the components are getting nerfed. I think Brutalizer is getting nerfed to 5 lethality? Like, is that even right? I think it's getting a lethality enough. I'm not really sure right now. And I know Dirk was too, but I think they reverted that now, and they're instead changing it to 20 AD, which practically sucks, and it is, you know, a pretty direct nerf to AD Renekton. I don't know why there's so many little nerfs and stuff this season for this type of playstyle, but is where it is, I guess. But if we just like think past all nerfs and think about what they're doing, all these items push into giant power spikes. So in the laning phase, Brutalizer Tiamat can build you into a Profane, which can be incredibly good into squishy champions. So sitting on maybe even like a Dirk Brutalizer for 2 item starts gives you immense armor pen. Combine that with like a sudden impact in runes as well, like you're getting so much lethality on top of that. Like even looking at it right now, you get 18 lethality, like just to start with. And you can get that like within the first, like under, I don't know, 5-6 minutes. If you have a super good laning phase, that is. But if you get both of them, your damage is extremely heavy. You can perma-tower dive your opponents. So in combination, if you can just rush the longswords, then go into Brutalizer, it remains super good. However, if you don't want to go for more of a lethality style and, you know, try and dominate your opponents, you can just go to the Pickaxe, which then opens up to going items such as, you know, Rune King, Eclipse, Shojin, if it worked, that is. As an item component, it is the cheapest, and it also leads you into your main items too, which help a lot for Renekton in this current climate of the game. Next, you can go Tiamat if you like to. It's a little bit lesser valued here, in my opinion, because I think before what made it really good was the fact that when it had just the active and it didn't have the wave clear cleave passive, which is a giant characteristic of the item in fairness, I think it remains super good for controlling waves, freezing, and you could say, oh, but you get Grubs Prio, you can just shove in the wave and all stuff like that. That is true, but you're also spending 1,200 gold for this, and it can just build out longswords, but you can also just go Dirk and save 200 gold and control your wave. Your wave state's a lot better. You still have good wave clear with empowered Q, even E. So do you really need a Tiamat? Tiamat does give you a little bit extra damage with an ult, I guess, if you want to animation cancel and stuff. But quite honestly, I think your power spikes of just going maybe a Dirk at that rate, or even Pickaxe, like to rush into your Eclipse, are way more superior in my honest opinion. So I don't really like Tiamat a lot, but I know some Renekton players like Tian Li, who is a Chinese Renekton player. Maybe I butchered his name. But I was watching some of his gameplay, and he was basically going Tiamat a lot of games. But this was like a few patches ago too, within the start of the season. So I don't know if he's doing that now, but that was an observation that I made. But yeah, I don't really see it being that good. And if you're trying to go the traditional route of going Tiamat into Cleaver, you are spending a lot of gold too. Like if you just look right now, I'm spending 2,300 gold on components in a way. And you could argue, you know, you're doing something similar, Brutalizer and Dirk, but the difference is that you're playing for burst damage, and with PTA, it is incredibly strong. So, in my opinion, I would ditch the Tiamat, and if you are against a tank matchup, or you're maybe weak-siding your matchup a little bit, you could just go with the Black Cleaver, Rush as well. I think Cleaver, after some of the changes it received recently, are definitely better, especially towards the item components as well. I think it is very superb. If you just want to get, you know, all your AD components into a tank matchup, funnel it into the Cleaver, and then just completely shred armor with Empowered E, and you're most likely to be winning a lot of your matchups top lane against tanks. It is not the best bruiser shredding item, but it is a good tank shredding item. That's something I want to clear too. I will explain that very soon as well in the follow-up to these items. Next, some of the little things that I want to just mention real quickly is the situational items here. So going Warden's Mail, I would recommend this into champions that rely a lot on auto attacks. So maybe, let's say you're playing against Urgot, you can just go the Warden's Mail if you like to, if you want to be a little rat like me, where I did it into Urpog and he just couldn't do absolutely anything. Like, you can do that if you like, or you can, you know, just not do that and maybe be good. Maybe seen as a saint for not rushing that, but honestly, you know, if you play to win, buy these items, like, you can't die at all. So it's a very good situational item into on-hit champions, even ranged champions too, like any cheese off-meta AD top laners too, it's pretty good into. Your next situational components rely on Executioner's Calling and Bramble Vest. If you're being attacked a lot and the champion has a lot of healing, maybe Warwick for instance, you can just go Bramble Vest. However, I feel like in that instance, you would rather go Executioners, due to the fact that Warwick has a lot more control with how he can play around it. He can just insta-Q and avoid the Bramble Vest. So instead, you can go Executioners, Q, then if he Qs you, it lowers. And you also have that anti-healing debuff at all times of your damage. So I think it is incredibly good for that. And most cases, I'm going Executioners and I'm going Bramble Vest. The only time I could see Bramble Vest being maybe a little bit better is into Fiora. Fiora absolutely cannot do anything if you're, let's say, weak-siding or you just want to play for consistency. I think Bramble is pretty good into that. However, I don't think it's entirely needed, but again, it's just an idea as well into what you can build as a component on Renekton. So now that I've talked about starting items, let's get into the bugged items that I made a video about. So what has changed since that video? Well, now Sundered Sky works on W, so that means it works on the crit, it works on the healing, the maximum health, you name it, it absolutely works now on W. At first, when they did change it to like allow the fix, there was a bug where if I instantly bought it and W'd first, it would not work the whole fight until I died, which was incredibly weird. I don't know if it still happens, but just be wary that if you are going to have the item, make sure to just auto-attack first, just in case. And then after that, your W should be working completely normal with the item. So just a little heads up there. And that also means that I think Sundered Sky is a little bit more viable. Is it Renekton's best item? Absolutely not. But I think it has a place in some builds, and I will go into that very soon. Next, I want to talk about Hullbreaker. Hullbreaker I was pretty skeptical on, but I was trying this item out, and I do think it has a place in some builds as a third item. In games where you need to split push, and even just have a little bit more offense into, like, you know, your sidelining ability, I think Hullbreaker is completely good, actually. It also gives you a lot of stats where moon speed is really important right now. The AD, the health of 3,000 gold. Every 5 attacks, you know, it procs the bonus damage, scaling off your health. On top of that as well, your W now stacks it really fast, so you can like quickly get Hullbreaker stacks like one after the other, which I think is incredibly strong as well and makes you completely tanky. You can shove in waves really reliably as well with the passive, and also playing around your team with it, as the item no longer gates you playing around your teammates or not. So overall, I think it's a good item. Not typically my item for playstyle to play, but you can play it nevertheless. And yeah, I just want to say that too if you did want to try it out. I recommend it third item, personally. Now, after that, let's talk about the elephant in the room, too, that a lot of people are completely misunderstanding, and that is Spirit of Shojin. Spirit of Shojin remains a very terrible item on Renekton, and I don't care what you have to say about win rates, this or that. The item is just terrible, and I think the only reason it has a good win rate in the first place is because by the time that Renekton players get it, they're more likely to be ending games because their champion is an early game champion. The stats are decent. Yes, your cooldown's a low cooldown, but your abilities are barely doing a lot with it because your W doesn't even proc it for one. Riot did change this and made it work for one PB cycle, and the next day when the Renekton buffs came out, they completely reverted it. Now, why did they do that, you might ask? They did it because I think Riot shift quite a lot of buffs on that patch for Renekton with his Q, Alt, and E. So I think they decided to pull it so they didn't make him too broken, which I think is valid. However, I feel like Renekton should not be punished for an item that just doesn't work. And the fact that everyone is still building Shojin makes me lose my mind. In the games that I see Renekton where I'm playing against them, the fact that they have a good start to the game, they rush Sundered Sky, which makes me bleed my eyes out too, followed by a Shojin right after, just to become completely useless and do 0 damage. It's just a complete meme at this point. Like, I don't even know what to say about it, honestly. Like, it is just not a good item, in my honest opinion. So, with that being said as well, I just think it's completely terrible. Like, why buy an item that is not even going to work reliably? Why not just build something that's going to enhance your ability to teamfight better, to 1v1 better? Why build an item that's just going to barely work, right? Like, I just don't like that idea of thinking. And for the people that are building it still, why are you doing that? They even nerfed it, by the way, on Renekton. I think before, his ult was giving instant stacks, but they've only made it, like, a lot slower now. I mean, don't fully take my word for that, but I remember when I tried it out in practice tool, I noticed I wasn't getting any more stacks from my ult. I was only getting 1 stack, which was incredibly weird. Maybe they fixed that and it was a bug. The next thing is that if I was to use my Q and hit multiple champions, I don't get max stacks now. I just get 1 stack. So, I don't know if that's how it should work, but still, Riot has definitely toned down this item for an item that barely works on Renekton anyways, so I just don't see why you want to do it. So yeah, with that said, I don't really have much else to say. It's just that, in retrospect, W does not get any stacks. Your W does not do it any more damage. Like, it doesn't even increase. And if you're gonna go tell me in the comment section, oh, Godrekton, it does work. Look at this, my damage has increased. Please remember that you're probably playing with Conqueror or PTA and you're misunderstanding the damage. I sat there to debate someone about this, going into practice tool numerous times thinking maybe I'm crazy, just to see that the item was just completely not working, while someone in my comment section kept telling me that it was working and I'm stupid and that I'm arrogant and all this and that. When I went out my way, tested it multiple times for the guy to, you know, kind of troll me, I guess. So, yeah. You know, so fuck you guys that trying to troll me that way. But with that said, that are the bugged items. Just a little TLDR. Sundered Sky works on W, Hullbreaker also works on W, and Shojin does not work on W, and it's trash. Moving on, let's get into the items of the video now. Here are main items that we're going to be focusing on within this video. We have Eclipse, Black Cleaver, Black Rune King, Stridebreaker, and Profane. So, when do I got either of these items? Well, firstly, let's talk about the main item that I've been playing a lot of in my games, and that is Eclipse. I believe Eclipse right now is probably the best item that Renekton could buy because it's like its own little, you know, damage passive, right? It's like its own ability, per se. Firstly, it's 2,800 gold. Renekton loves cheap power spike items because that enhances his ability to snowball, being that it also has a 8% target maximum health damage passive as well, which is, you know, dealt from 2 attacks, like basic attacks or even like 2 abilities. It remains incredibly strong because all Renekton needs to do is auto attack you, and you're instantly proccing the passive. And when you're playing against tanks, when you're playing against bruisers, anyone like at all, right? You're consistently shredding their health down on top of the damage you're already dealing. The item is also giving you 70 AD, 15 ability haste for 2,800 gold, with all these snowbally components too. It remains super strong for Renekton's snowballing capabilities. In my school of thought, I feel like Renekton is best suited for snowbally playstyles because this champion definitely does fall off in this season so far, in my opinion too. And if you're able to get those quick power spikes, if you're able to get all those stats that you can completely stat check people and try to end the game as fast as possible by the mid-length of the game, I think that's where Renekton's going to really shine. So items like Eclipse incredibly help out in that. Also, that's not even talking about the shield as well, which gives Renekton extra utility to survive in fights, to help him in 1v2s when he's snowballing. It just remains a solid item overall, and as of right now, it is also Renekton's highest win rate item to start with, and the pick rate might be smaller than Sundered Sky, but again, I think Sundered Sky only has like a little bit of a high win rate due to the fact that that's just a stable item that people are buying, and while the stats are decent, I don't think it's a great item for snowballing. It is more of a item to like just kind of stat check people, and if you're in those matchups where you're going to be winning anyways, that's where Renekton's just going to be doing better with the item. And in my hypothesis, I think that's where Renekton's getting picked anyways. He's getting picked to counter champions, so I think that's why it has like a win rate like it does. And I really don't believe in it being a good first item, if you're wondering about my opinion on Sundered Sky. Following up on that, let's talk about Black Cleaver. So I did already just explain, like not too long ago, that the stats are a lot better now, the components. All these components give Renekton a better snowballing start too. If he does solo kill a tank, he is not going to go get punished for, you know, building into Kindle Gem and doing no damage. He's going to consistently keep his damage up. He's going to consistently be able to control wave states, be pretty tanky, be very offensive. Overall, and all in all, it's just a very strong item in that regard. They also load the stacks from 6 to 5, which is even better. Every time using ability 2, it is proccing the further moon speed passive. So overall, it's pretty good. And there are games where you just want to like build it first into champions like Malphite, maybe Cassante. You can go if you're a little bit behind too. Like, it's very flexible in how you want to play it. Like, if you want to play it as a utility bruiser where you can shred armor for your team, if you're able to like peel people off, like, it is incredibly good for that. Or if you just want to be aggressive in the early stage of the game and just shred all the armor that people are building, Cleaver is pretty good. Is it the best first item? No, but is it reliable? Yes. So take of it what you will and build it, you know, in the scenarios where you're against a tank in what I think is probably the best idea to do. Next, we have Blair Rune King. Blair Rune King is definitely Renekton's best item if you want to snowball and do damage. If I'm playing full AD or if I'm against a bruiser matchup such as Set or Darius, Blair Rune King for me is quite possibly the best item because the raw passive stat of the, you know, 12% current health damage is so incredibly strong for Renekton's W, where every time you have Bork and you just like dash onto someone, you can completely shred their health and just, you know, be able to nuke them instantly. This item is not only consistent into bruisers, but it's also very consistent into squishy champions. So even just rushing this item, you're going to have that damage to completely nuke squishes, and it'll help you carry over the damage throughout the entire game too. So it's a really good investment early game if you want to buy it. My only con, however, with this is that you are very squishy. And right now, with the matchups that are also presented into you, rushing Blair Rune King is definitely a risk. So if you are getting melee matchups, you can easily go the Blair Rune King. But if you are playing against ranged champions, it does become incredibly hard. So that's where this item is very situational, I feel like, unless you're trying to force a full ID build. That doesn't mean you can't build it into range matchups, you certainly can, but I think there's better options for that, which I'm about to explain. Next, we have Stridebreaker. Stridebreaker, in my opinion, doesn't get enough love. I know some people like to kind of talk bad about the item, but in quite honestly, I think it's a very good initiator item, right? You get moon speed from the active based on the people that you hit, you slow everyone around you for a certain amount, you get attack speed on a Tiamat item. It's kind of like a really solid item in my opinion. If we just look at the stats too, it gives 50 AD, 30% attack speed, and 450 health too. And when you compare like some of the other items like Black Cleaver, like not even that is given enough health, right? So it remains like pretty strong in that right as well. And it gives you like really good win stats as well, like the attack speed and AD. If you're dominating like a range matchup, they simply can't do anything because your AD is too high, your attack speed to weave in auto attacks and animation cancel faster remain really strong. They're slow as well. It's kind of a wet dream for Renekton, in all honesty, when you consider it against range matchups. So I highly recommend that first if you're playing against Vaynes. You name it, any champion that's like immobile or, you know, has a lot of moon speed, it's pretty good to cripple them that way. So yeah, basically Stridebreaker I think is good. You can build its second item with Eclipse too, which I also think is pretty good too, but I'll explain that a bit below as well for itemization. So yeah, if you're a fan and you want to try something out and you hate range matchups, Stridebreaker I think is definitely great. And last, but certainly not least, I have Profane Hydra as Renekton's last main item build that you can go. So this is quite possibly, you know, one of the most fun items you can play on Renekton. The active, the lethality, like just everything about it is incredibly fun. Even the active looks cool as hell in all things considered. The only thing that I think maybe lacks of the item is that I think it spikes more as a second item. So if I'm playing full AD Renekton, I like to build it after the Blair Rune King. However, if I did go like the Dirk and Brutalizer path into a Profane, I definitely feel this damage into squishy matchups and it completely shreds people in seconds. Is it stronger than Bork in 1v1? I think Bork is definitely the better choice. However, if you are just against someone that you don't need to have Blair Rune King against, Profane definitely feels good. You have wave clear too, which allows you to get prior for objectives. You have animation cancelling benefits too, to help you one-shot a lot faster. The only thing that I also recommend is try to hold the active as long as possible, because the lowest one is, the more damage that you're able to deal. And I know Renekton players have a habit of using it after W or even after their ult. So just make sure that if you do have a kill range, try and like save it towards the end if you can. Maybe if you're trying to do this combo on the screen right now, you have like a little Profane at the end of the combo. I think that is pretty good there, or even just like in the middle of the combo, just for the amount of maximum damage that you can deal. So as good as this item is, I definitely don't think it's good into tanks or bruisers. So quite honestly, if you think you're playing against someone that's like very squishy, maybe they're playing really bad and poor, you can rush Profane first, but again, it's very situational. And I think that's what I love about the items this season. There's a lot of situational picks here, and it also adds to the skill floor and ceiling of Renekton, because he's not incredibly strong right now, but I think he can be incredibly strong with the right build and itemization for the game. And I think that's what makes it most fun for me. So yeah, hopefully this little segment helps understand what you can build. And now it's time to talk about the lesser considered items too. So all these items are items that I've seen Renekton players build, and they are items that I've also tried out. And I want to quickly go over why I don't really like them. Titanic was good for a couple patches, but they did nerf it. That's not to say that it isn't good, but I feel like my other options here kind of triumph it in a way. And I feel like, I mean, at most, I could go Titanic second if I wanted to in a bruiser build, but I think going mainly full HP and AD items aren't that strong without some burst in between that, or other tank items such as Sterix or Jackshow. So in my honest opinion, I don't think Titanic is so great for me. But maybe it's good for you, but certainly not for me. Next, we have Triforce. I saw Romanian playing this as he came back to the game recently, kind of dominating his games as mid-lane Renekton. I did try this out, but you are spending a lot of gold stats for all this mixture here, when I could be getting a Rune King. If I'm going to choose between the two, Rune King is giving me infinitely more damage. Triforce does feel good to have because of the moon speed and the attack speed, and even the Spellblade passive, right? But the thing is, I think it's a bit too much of a, like, if you've got like so many kills, right? I think that's when Triforce is going to be good. It's good to maybe just like, I don't know, have as in like having like a meme build. But that's essentially it, I think. I don't think it's too great, in my opinion, but maybe it works for you. Next, I have Terminus. I think of how it works is it's too inconsistent. I don't really want to buy an item that's just going to make it swapped between Armor Pen and Magic Pen to tank stats. I think it's incredibly meh. It's a lot better for champions that consistently attack faster, like Irelia, ADCs. I think in those situations, that's where this item is pretty good. But for Renekton, not really. I think it's very underwhelming. Next, we have Experimental Hexplate, which certainly is an experimental choice if you want to, you know, try and do something with your ult. But I think it's more of a coping item for people that want their ult to do more for them. I think Renekton ult already does a lot for me in the playstyles that I play, so I don't really need to go a Hexplate. I think it's a little bit, I don't know, it's just a very weird item. You ult to get moon speed, attack speed, but, you know, you have your abilities to do more damage, and you're not really able to fully use that auto attacks that you're getting from the ult because you're probably one-shotting with your abilities anyways. So why not cater more towards building damage or other stats that are going to help you achieve that? So 3,000 gold for this item, when I could also go Rune King once again, is probably more superior. Yes, it's tanky. Yes, it gives me a lower ult cooldown, but with the ult buffs Renekton received anyways the last year or two, I think that's enough, and I don't need to go Hexplate for that, honestly. Opportunity, pretty bad item. I mean, the fact that you one-shot someone and get moon speed, it's not really helping Renekton that much, quite honestly. I think he already gets better items as well that are lethality based. So I think Opportunity is a missed opportunity for me. Sundered Sky. Sundered Sky is definitely better, I think, in your 3rd to 4th item, which is probably weird to say, right, with how the items all built first on a lot of champions, but in my opinion, I feel like once I've gone Eclipse and I go either Cleaver or Sterix, getting a Sundered Sky after that feels really strong because at that point, my crit's going to do more damage with the amount of AD that I have in my build. My healing's going to be a lot more on top of the health that I bought from a Sterix or Cleaver. The haste also amounts up towards it. Overall, I think it's a good sweet spot in the 3rd to 4th if you're going to play it on Renekton. First item, it feels incredibly underwhelming and inconsistent. You could be ahead in a matchup too, and then it feels completely worthless as the game goes on. And even if you look at the AD and the 3,000 gold that you spend on it, it's just pretty low when I could go a 70 AD item in Eclipse, which is also cheaper, for a champion that wants to end the game as early as possible. And finally, Ghostblade. My favorite item, which Riot continues to make completely worthless. Like, the fact that they haven't given it attack speed back yet to give it that characteristic it used to have completely hurts me. If it had attack speed, I'd definitely consider buying it, but it just doesn't. Like, yes, it's cheap, but having no haste or attack speed makes it incredibly meh to me, and you can't really fit it in a build without being punished for not going haste. So with that said, I think Ghostblade is not really so great. So guys, now that I've talked about the items that I like as main rush items to the items that I also dislike, it is now finally time to go over the main builds for Renekton in Season 14. So the first build that I want to cover over, and the build that I've been going the most in my Season 14 climb, is Eclipse. Now, I have a couple of Eclipse playstyles here just to like kind of shift between. So firstly, my consistent playstyle that I play towards like more of a bruiser role, which I think is probably the best role you can play in right now, is I go Eclipse. I then alternate between Cleaver or Styrex depending on the game. Next, I then choose between those items with either Sundered Sky or Cleaver. And after that, I then get my Jack-Show, and then I finish off with a night-to-night situational with the game. So let me explain this, right? Firstly, we win our laning phase, we get our Eclipse, which gives us a shield, we get a lot of AD and haste. Next, we get in towards the mid game. Right now, I think objective taking, at least in high elo, I mean, it's always kind of been like this. It's where it's incredibly important, right? And Renekton needs health. He needs these items that keep him alive and make him a threat that is consistent through the whole fight, and that is incredibly hard to kill. At this point in the game, if you get a Styrex second item, where you need to play for dragons and you need to play for team fights and just abusing your lead that you gather top lane, Styrex completely 1v9s fights due to the fact that it gives you 400 health, it gives you tenacity, you get attack damage scaling off your levels. Because top lane is also an isolated role, you're able to get a lot more damage a lot faster with this item, and as a second item too, you're coming to the fights with such a level lead over people that you're just incredibly hard to kill. The tenacity as well makes you really hard to kite out. And also, I think on top of that as well, Styrex gauge remains really great right now because I think a lot of CC is very prevalent. And with the map changes too being more open, you're more likely to be a hittable target, and people can kite you a lot easier. So if you find less ways for the enemies to be able to do that, you're just able to completely control fights. You're able to steamroll anyone that you reach. It's just incredibly good. And by the off chance that if you do get low with your ultimate, which may be rank 2, you do also get the Eclipse Shield, and you also get a Styrex Gauge Shield. All this combined just makes you completely a 1v9 machine, right? And I think it's just an incredibly strong choice. And I do need to shout out 3-in-1 again for, finding this out, for this item spikes. I was building my Styrex third item, but as soon as I moved it to my second item, I noticed my games were becoming a lot easier because my leads weren't going to waste. The meta state for the game is definitely a lot harder for champions that can kite you, like Smolder, Vayne, Karma. However, once you get this Styrex, it makes it incredibly hard for champions to do this to you, and I think it gives Renekton his strongest state possible right now, so if you want to try that out, I highly recommend it, and you will not regret it. Following on from this, after that you can then go Sundered Sky if you want a bit more damage stats, a bit more healing in the fights too. But if the enemy does have a lot of tanks and you want to shred armor and just get like a bit more haste too, you can just go Cleaver here. Following on from this, if you want to just get mixed resistances to help you survive the fights and be a lot more tanky and unkillable, Jack-Show is a perfect fit after that with all the stats that it's providing. On top of the passive too, which gives you even more for being in combat. It is incredibly good for that, just to round off the build. And then finally, if you want a bit of damage or a situational item, you can go the Sundered Sky, Death Stance, Guardian Angel, Randuin's, Spirit Visage, you name it, right? Like, you can build absolutely anything last. So my build typically will probably look like this in majority of my games. This is by far my favorite build, and I think Renekton's strongest build too, if you're considering items that are going to consistently give you a lead on top of being really tanky, being a high damage threat, and just being overall fun too. Now that we've covered the main first build, I do want to go over into a little second alteration that you can do with the build. So this playstyle is more for people that want to go Blind Rune King, they want to snowball their lead and have insane damage in the side lanes and also high one-shot potential throughout the whole game. That is now Bork Eclipse angle. Again, like I told you already, if you're in a matchup where you think Bork is superior or you do just want to like squeeze out more damage in your 1v1s and just be a nightmare for people to completely deal with, I'm a big fan of going Blind Rune King into Eclipse. After that point, you can alter your build into even like a Styrex if you want more teamfighting presence, maybe Hullbreaker if you want to keep side laning and have more damage to stat check people, or even a Black Cleaver to shred armor and just have a bit more utility for yourself to dealing with tank players or tank items, anything of that nature, right? After that point, you can just go into a Jack-Show as well, or you can just go into more like AD-based items. You could get a Profane if you like to. You could get Death Stance, Shredder. Oh wait, you can't get Shredder anymore. My bad, actually. But the point is, you can just like alter the build and go like other AD or lethality items if you want to keep snowballing that way. I think it is incredibly good to go like maybe a hybrid build between you get these 3 items into a Jack-Show that remains very strong. You have a lot of utility. You can even put a Titanic in there, a Tiamat item, like Profane Stridebreaker, anything of that nature, right? Like, it feels super good to do that. And like I also mentioned too, you can also get like a Stridebreaker third or like even second with this build if you're against ranged champions, or you can go like Stridebreaker into Eclipse. You can do that as well. So really, you know, there's not much else to really say on it, but if you are snowballing and you want like more damage, like just to, you know, feel that ultimate power that this item pack can give you with Eclipse and stuff like that, then no doubt that, you know, I wouldn't recommend anything else than this Playstyle's here for you. So definitely give it a try if you like. Definitely my more favoritable build style to go bulk into Eclipse if I'm able to. But if I'm playing in like my main account and like more of high-elo games, I definitely like to go the Eclipse Starrix overall. So really, it's just dependent on like you as a player and how you're feeling more so. So you either go for consistency and playing for team fights, or you can go for more side laning and selfish players with the bulk Eclipse. So with that being said, that's more so the Eclipse styles, and it's now time to go into the Stridebreaker playstyles. So I have a couple builds here. They kind of follow the same purpose. Like here I have one build that's more for consistency, which I like to do into ranged or mobility comps. My next one after that, I like to do into like when I want to snowball and want to feel a lot stronger. So again, more selfish and more high carry potential build style with the Stridebreaker. So firstly, let's go over into our first build here. So here we have Stridebreaker, Starrix, Renekton, and Cleaver. Obviously, my two item choices here are entirely situational. As this build, it's already pretty situational that I like to do into ranged champions. When I play against champions like Vayne, Quinn, Kennen, potentially Jace, maybe not Jace so much, but you get the point, right? Anyone that's going to be poking me from a distance that tries to kite me and try to outplay me by their movement speed with Ghost or something like that, Stridebreaker remains really supreme in trying to nullify that, as I'm able to cripple my opponents with the active, as we've already talked about. I get consistent moon speed too in my temper passive as well. All in all, it just remains a super good item, and if I'm able to sit on my target and do insane amounts of damage with my PTA rune as well into range matchups, on top of my base damage and animation cancelling benefits that I also get from Stridebreaker allowing me to be faster and also the attack speed and AD, it just means I'm insta-killing my opponent essentially, and no one can escape my, you know, jaws of death, you know, per se, as I reach them. So once we have this item, I can fall into more of a team fighting build, as I can go into the Starrix Gauge if I need to. Again, really incredible utility stats. I have a slow, moon speed to reach people. I have the lifeline passive for my Starrix Gauge, for the shield, the tenacity. Like, it might very well be the best utility build that you possibly can go for your team. And then once you get into the third item, you can either go for the Black Cleaver if there's a lot of armor threats where you want to shred armor for your team or even for yourself. Or you can also go the Renekton too. Renekton presents a lot of counterplay for crit champions. And with the champions already mentioned too, the passive as well, which allows you to lower crit damage. It helps incredibly for stifling all types of crit users, and most of the time you're playing against maybe an ADC with crit items, especially in X patch as well, in 14.6 where they're buffing crit items, or even top lane 2 where you're playing against these champions that will be purchasing crit items in like a Kraken Slayer, maybe even like Storm Razor potentially, or, you know, some of these like weird items some people build. Like it's just doing work against that. And it remains like super good in that aspect too. I also forgot to mention as well, it is very cheap. 2,700 gold for a quick power spike that builds from Warden's Mail and Giant's Belt. Really good components into range comps or even champions that just do a lot of crit damage. Like very melee based like Yasuo, Yon. Super good for that too. Overall, I think it's just an incredibly good build into range champions if you want that consistency. And after these items too, you can just build whatever you want for the situation. You could just get like, I don't know, an Eclipse for a shield, for damage. You could get Jackshaw, maybe Force of Nature for AP comps or something like that. Cleaver for shred. You get the point, right? There's a lot of ways you can itemize, and at that point, you just want to build like what's going to suit you the best for the game. Next, we have my snowballing build here. So if I decide that I need to be a carry and I need to completely dominate the game, that's where I'm going to go in Eclipse second. Not only does it give me a lot of AD and it's very cheap for a power spike, but it also gives me a shield too. And having that shield for the mid game too, on top of the health that I'm already getting from a Stridebreaker, I'm actually like doing a lot of work with it too. Like I have lots of damage, I have lots of kill potential, utility, I'm still like tanky as well, like it's just really good overall, and it just works. It looks like a weird combination, but hear me out. Actually try it out and just see how it feels. And because you're able to stick onto your targets consistently too, the passive procs a lot more on top of the Stridebreaker, keeping you in the fights with the active and the moon speed that you're getting as well. So it remains very superior in that aspect. And after that too, if you want to be a bit more greedy, you can go into your Rune King for intense damage. The whole animation cancelling aspect of the combos too that you're able to do with the attack speed that you're getting and all the percentage damage from Eclipse, Rune King. It's just uncontested, and it feels so good to play. So I highly recommend to play this build too. You can also go Bork second if you like. There's really no problem with that if you want to do that. It does also feel good. You then can also go Cleaver, or you can go into tank like a Sterix. Honestly, the sky's your limit, right? The way you just want to play it is play for your win conditions, like your power spikes that are going to come into effect in the game. So it's all about timing it right. If you get those right timings, you're going to be always dominating the entire game. I guarantee you that, right? But even if you do want to go into more AD aspect builds, that's also not a problem because you do achieve a lot of damage of it. Like regardless of what build, as long as you have like a Rune King and maybe even some like, you know, Lethality or an Eclipse sprinkled in here, it just remains super good and works. But after that point, we can go a Cleaver. You could say Shredder, but I don't really think it's like too good when you already have a lot of moon speed and you're slowing people. It's pretty overkill. Ghostblade, same situation. I don't think it's really fit for there. I'd rather just go like AD and HP items if it's myself at that point. Maybe throw in a Jack Show if I need to. Again, the consistent trend is Jack Show is super good on Renekton because you have a lot of health and consistent stats. And once you have those, you're basically able to kind of win the game and play for yourself. That's going to help you win the fights as well with the stats that you have. With that being said then, I like Stridebreaker. I'm actually a fan of it. Some people don't like Stridebreaker, and I could see why. But at the same time, I don't think it's really hurting your chances of how you play Renekton. If anything, it's only helping you in this meta climate of the game with range compositions, movement speed, like Ghost being taken every game. I think it's an actual big key to having success with Renekton, as a matter of fact. So yeah, if you want to try something different, you're feeling a little bit gapped in terms of like these little issues that are like prevalent right now within the game, I highly recommend Stridebreaker and you will not regret it. Now it's time to talk about our Black Cleaver build. I have one here, but I'm going to have another one up really shortly as of now. So here we are, we have our two builds. The second build's gonna look funny, but let me explain why I think this is viable. So firstly, it's no surprise that sometimes, as Renekton players, we can be a little bit inconsistent, right? Sometimes, the way Renekton works, in my aspect, is like, he's a very mindset-based champion, right? And some games, we are gonna have some bad performances, we are gonna fall behind, and Renekton incredibly sucks at that, right? And my only way of being able to play these situations is just by building items that are going to benefit the team and like benefit my way of trying to win the game. So that's when I take this cook opportunity of a position and I try and build items for my team. So I get things like a Randuin's, a Knight's Vow, Anathema. I also have two here, my bad, little bug. Sterix. All these items allow me to live longer. They allow me to give benefits to my team in slows, extra healing. I'm able to take damage, like mitigation, like from other people onto myself. I have an Anathemas to provide more utility in my stuns and damage reduction too. So in these positions where I fall behind, it is not a bad idea just to go the Cleaver, as it's like a very, you know, consistent, maybe, well, I wouldn't say totally consistent, but it's very stable as an item. I have Armor Shred, I have health, I can then get into my Randuin's potentially or Sterix. Then I can like go into a Knight's Vow if I need to for the mid game. It is incredibly good that like it provides you this like this role, right? And it's really important as well, Renekton, to understand a role in the game. You're not always going to be the carry. You're not always going to be able to frontline for your team. You're not always going to be able to, you know, peel properly. Like, you need to, like, think in all these situations, like, what can you be doing differently? What can you achieve? And in a game where you're able to get less gold and you're able to, like, be less of a carry, the only thing that you can do is to buy time for your team, to buy items that are going to benefit them. And that's why I have this second build here, which is specifically for those situations. So while I have explained the second build a little bit already, let's talk about our first build here. As I've mentioned, Black Cleaver Rush is pretty good situationally into tank matchups, where people will be buying armor into you, and then they become incredibly hard to kill. And with the Cleaver Shred, you're able to shred armor, you're able to allow your teammates to do more damage, and on top of that, you then can like start building other items that are going to help you for the game. So at this stage, you're able to go either like a tank shredding route, of going Eclipse, Bork, or maybe like Bork Eclipse for damage. Just like this build, but with like a twist, right? Like you just start the Cleaver first. And then you carry over this consistent damage in the side lane that makes you really strong, really tanky. Or you can also go into like, you know, tank items as well. Really, there's not a lot to this build. It's either you build this into a tank and then go into AD items, into a Bruiser, or you just go into like defensive stats that help your team. There's nothing more or nothing less really about this build. It's kind of like what it implies. So that's like basically it with this playstyle, right? There's nothing else to really be said about it. So in conclusion, I only recommend it if you just want to play into tanks as well, and you have champions as well that like also benefit from the Cleaver. If you have an AD assassin jungler, maybe even mid laner, that's like a head or like an ADC. It's a, really good item for that, to help them perform better. Or if you're having a game where you're struggling, but your teammates are doing good and you want to support them, I definitely recommend Black Cleaver into these like utility items, because there's no point building damage items in behind. It's too much gold to access and too much gold that you're unable to gain. So if you get these cheap power spikes that are gonna like, help you get back into the game, like this junkyard build here, you'll have no doubt of being able to be useful and still having a win condition for your team. But now that we've explained the Black Cleaver route, let's talk about Profane. Profane is definitely probably the most fun build. Full AD is in my roots as a player. I've loved full AD ever since Season 6, which is when I first started playing those roles. I did play it a bit in Season 5 too, but not enough to where I became quite a main until Season 10 of the full AD playstyle, or let's say up until the mythic items where I was going Godrekton into bruiser routes. But now that I remove Godrekton and stuff like that as well, going full AD is more of a viable choice again, since like the Prowler's removal too, on top of that. And in my opinion, I think my most fun build is by far these. So let's talk about it. I've already talked about when you should go Profane and Bork. So again, same thing applies, right? If you're in a matchup where you can completely dominate a squishy opponent and just steamroll them, going Dirk into Profane Hydra can be very strong. At that point, you can then go into your Rune King, or if you have the Dirk, you can go into a Ghostblade. Ghostblade, maybe it's not my most favorite item, but you can do that if you want moon speed and you still want to raid the jungle and rotate. It's still a great item for that, don't get me wrong. Still, it's a bit of a lesser valued item, but if you're not playing with Ghost on Renekton, it can be very good in that aspect. However, if you're not playing with a Dirk and you don't want to play with a Ghostblade, you can just get Rune King as well, which then gives you the most strongest damage in the game. At that point of having Bork and Profane, or Profane Bork, you can completely one-shot people with your W and just literally take anyone out in any fight possible. The only con to this playstyle, however, is you are very flash reliant. So playing off your flashes, or even just like trying to play off vision with Red Trinket, can be incredibly hard, especially in high reloads of the game. You have to really be cautious and you have to use it, pretty smart. You don't want to just waste it for the 0-5 top laner that you just killed again, that's worth 0 gold. Instead, you want to save it for the Fed ADC potentially that is trying to like dominate the fights. And if you can eliminate the win condition just like that, you're going to gather your team a lot of advantages within the following fight of where they're able to kill the rest of the people, you're able to kill the rest of the people, you're able to get objectives, barons, towers, you name it, right? That is basically the sole purpose of playing full AD Renekton. So if you're able to present opportunities for your team, play as the Glass Cannon playstyle to eliminate threats within the game, it is super good for that. However, it is very hard playstyle to make work. It is very risky. It can be very hard too if your teammates are all throwing the game. So it does come down to trying to play it really smart and play it very consistent. Because even the most littlest of throws that you do on a full AD playstyle can certainly ruin your chances of winning the game. So it comes under supervision that you play really well and very intelligently to create opportunities within the game and also win in that aspect as well. But now that we've talked about like the little playstyle as well, after that, if you don't go Ghostblade, let's say you're not going to go Ghostblade, you can go Eclipse. You can get Eclipse third, which gives you even more damage. You get a shield, helps you really hard in the 1v1 sideline aspect of the game. So if you feel like that is your route of winning, you can do it then. Playing off in the jungle, hiding, using your red trinket, surprising people, going in the side lane, trying to 1v1, kill carries, take towers. That is like the whole methodology of trying to play with these items. After that, at this point in the game, people are going to start building armor against you. This is where Shredder comes in. Shredder, while it's a little bit weak and does scale off lethality, it does remain still pretty good here, as you're getting a good percentage of armor pen. You're getting AD, lethality, haste. It remains incredibly good for that. You could go Cleaver if you like to, but it entirely depends really. And that is like my second build that I'm about to go into. However, to finish off the build, if you don't have Ghostblade already, or maybe not Eclipse, you could get the Edge of Night. So Edge of Night allows you to block certain abilities that stop you from getting caught. So any stuns, any knockups, anything that's going to stop you right away in a fight, it remains incredibly good for that. However, it is very hard to make work, in my opinion. You need to play very smart, very intelligently, and you really need to hold on to that passive as long as you can. If you're in a fight with no passive, it's not a fight worth taking. So that is something you need to really consider well, which also allow you to win the game completely. All that being said, this is a very glass cannon build. It is a very hard playstyle to make work. And if you feel like you want a build that's a little bit more easier to pilot, I would recommend this, which is a lot more versatile, a lot more player friendly too, while giving you a really fun experience and also a really good mixture of stats. So let's talk about it. So here I have Eclipse first. Like I was telling you guys too, Eclipse felt pretty good to rush as a first time on Renekton, and it's very pivotable, where I can pivot the item in being able to go Bruiser, I can pivot it into being a anti-range build where I can go Stridebreaker, or I can even go full AD if I want to completely dominate the game. The highest win rated build at the moment statistically that I've seen is Eclipse into Profane, and mainly this is the reason because the stats that you're getting are very high AD, you get lethality, lots of haste. It works super well too with its damage and stuff like that. You are susceptibly tanky as well with the Eclipse Shield, so it remains pretty good for that. You could also go Bulk too if you want to maintain that insane damage and 1v1 potential. Off that as well, you can go into your Profane. At this point, you are completely unstoppable. You can fight any champion in the game if you play it correctly. After that, you can then go into your Cleaver for an armor shredding and health item. If it's a little bit harder to make work, you can get a Sterix or maybe earlier. Essentially, all these items just depend on the point of the game. Like, let's just say, for instance, are you unstoppable? Does the enemy have no threats? If yes, you can go these items into Borg, into Cleaver, then Sterix. Or you can get a Sterix as well, just to make sure that you're never going to die. However, is the enemy tanky? Can the enemy potentially kill me? If so, you can get a Sterix third, maybe even second, then go for Profane, and then go into Rune King and Cleaver. Does the enemy have skill shots that can potentially leave me in a really big disadvantage and potentially kill me off and make me throw the game? If so, you can build your Edge of Night a little bit earlier here. You can play around with it. You can play around with like whatever feels best, right? As long as you have Eclipse first item or second item and Profane within the third item slot, it's going to feel good. It's going to feel great even. So I highly recommend that. And that's kind of as far as it's really going with builds for me at the moment, in my opinion. So yeah, these are like my expected builds and like the builds that I'd like to play at the moment and like my whole methodology on Renekton minimization in Season 14. And with that said, that's really it. And I know it took over maybe an hour to explain these things, but I did want to go into as much depth as I could possible for you guys because I think it's really important as a Renekton one-trick pony to give back to the community, to give a really good, well thought out video that can help explore views, help you understand how to play him in Season 14 in these times of it being a little bit of a grey area for Renekton mains. And with all that said, I think that is basically it. Hopefully this video taught you guys a lot. Hopefully you enjoyed a lot in this video too. Maybe at times it came off very like much, but again, I like to give more than give less, you know, because I think the more that you guys know, the more that I can teach you and the more that you can implement in your gameplay and also have more ways to win a game. And my saying is that the more tools that you have in your toolkit, the more that you're able to, you know, do within the game or like with any situation, right? Like it's just fact, you know? If you come prepared for any situation, no one's going to stop you. You're going to have an answer for everything that comes your way. So that is like my take on Renekton philosophy and playing him as a one-trick pony. But yeah, that is my Renekton build guide for Season 14. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to leave a like. If you guys want to see another Renekton guide, or if you want to see any other Renekton videos, anything specifically, leave in the comments below. I do have some guides that I'm also working on at this time, but I did want to just make sure that I'm taking one thing one step at a time, because I typically like to do a lot of things all at once, but it makes me never push out something. So I want to stop doing that. I want to definitely work on my projects one by one, and that's what I'll be focusing on from here on out. With that said, thank you for watching, and I will see you guys next time. So peace out, and have a good one, and have a great day. Goodbye.